Buckle up and maybe plug your nose because this story is going to get funky, literally. Surprisingly, ancient civilizations were actually killing it, sometimes doing even better than our European ancestors would thousands of years later. Around 2500 BC in the Indus Valley, people in cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were living in the future. They had brick houses with private bathrooms, actual seats, and water that flushed waste through terracotta pipes into a city-wide underground sewage system. Basically, a dude in ancient Pakistan had a more bougie and sanitary bathroom experience than a king in 17th century London. But alas, humanity doesn't always progress in a straight line. Sometimes we moonwalk backward, and the most spectacular regression has to be the Roman Empire. When you mention Rome, you think of master engineers, the people who built the Colosseum, and roads that lasted millennia. They also built massive public toilets, but the word public here carries a dark social meaning you wouldn't expect. Imagine a long room with marble benches, holes cut side by side with absolutely no dividers. Going to the bathroom in Rome was a vibrant team sport. You walk in, hike up your toga, and sit down thigh to thigh with your neighbor. While you're handling your biological needs, you might be discussing politics, closing a business deal, or gossiping about last night's bloody gladiator match. Privacy was a luxury concept that didn't exist, but the most horrifying part wasn't seeing someone else straining. It was how they cleaned up afterward. The Romans didn't have Charmin Ultra Soft. They had a cutting-edge technology called the Tersorium. Basically, it was a natural sea sponge tied to the end of a wooden stick. After you wiped, you would dip that stick into a bucket of salt water or vinegar sitting in the middle of the room to sanitize it. And I am using massive air quotes for sanitize, and then you left it there for the next person to use. That's right. The greatest empire in human history, the conquerors of the Mediterranean, shared a communal butt brush. They were swapping gut flora, passing around E. coli and parasites as happily as if they were passing the Olympic torch. Sometimes I wonder how many bad political decisions in Rome were caused because the senators were irritable from an infection they got from that cursed sponge stick. There were actual cases in history where enemies or assassins climbed up the poop chute to break into the castle and stab the owner while they were in their most vulnerable position. A truly crappy way to die. But if you think castle life was bad, try being a commoner in the streets. In cramped medieval cities like London or Paris, there were no sewers. People did their business in chamber pots inside their houses. And in the morning, what did they do with a pot full of the entire family's production from the night before? They performed a majestic yeet out into the street. The process went like this. You open the second-floor window, scream the magic warning, "Gar low," which means watch out for the water, and dump the pot upside down. If you were an unlucky pedestrian who heard that phrase, you had about 0.5 seconds to dive onto the sidewalk or accept your fate of being showered in your neighbor's dinner from yesterday. European streets back then were basically open sewers. Human waste, horse manure, trash, and dead animal carcasses mixed together to form a toxic sludge that was ankle-deep. People had to invent shoes with massive platform soles called pattens, not for fashion or to look taller, but simply to keep their feet from sinking into the poop when they went to the market. The smell was so horrific it became part of the atmosphere. People back then believed in the miasma theory, thinking that bad smells caused disease. But ironically, they failed to connect that dumping poop in the street was the cause of the smell. Ancestral logic is sometimes really hard to understand. Even royalty in later periods wasn't much better off. Let's talk about the magnificent Palace of Versailles of King Louis XIV in France. A palace with thousands of rooms, gold leaf everywhere, perfectly manicured gardens, but missing one basic thing: toilets. Yes, the Sun King built a symbol of absolute power, but forgot places for the thousands of nobles living there to pee. The result: hallways, stairwells, fireplaces, and behind those luxurious red velvet curtains became makeshift latrines. The heavy perfume worn by the French aristocracy back then wasn't for seduction. It was a desperate attempt to mask the stench of decay rising from every corner of the palace and from their own unwashed bodies. However, in that smelly chaos, there were glimmers of innovation. In 1596, Sir John Harington, a mischievous godson of Queen Elizabeth IV, invented the first flushing toilet and called it the Ajax. It had an overhead water tank and a flush lever, basically the ancestor of the porcelain throne in your house. The Queen tried it and actually liked it. But why didn't it go viral immediately? 2 reasons. First, it required a lot of water, which not everyone had available on the second floor. Second, and more importantly, was a design flaw. Harrington's toilet was a straight pipe down to the cesspit. There was no barrier. So after you flushed all the methane gas, the stench and the bacteria from the pit below would float right back up, turning your bathroom into a literal gas chamber. People would rather use a pot than install a stink pump directly into their bedroom. It took nearly 200 years until 1775 for a Scottish watchmaker named Alexander Cummings to solve this problem with an invention as simple but as monumental as the discovery of fire. The S-trap. Look at the bottom of your toilet, that curvy pipe. It holds a small amount of water after every flush, creating a perfect air seal that stops gas from the sewer from rising up while still letting waste go down. Genius, simple, effective, and the savior of humanity's olfactory senses. If I could time travel, I wouldn't shake Napoleon's hand. I'd shake Alexander Cummings' hand and thank him profusely. But now that we had flushing toilets, where did the waste go? In the 19th century, as the Industrial Revolution exploded, London's population skyrocketed, and all those shiny new flush toilets were dumping straight into the River Thames. The problem was, the Thames was also the city's source of drinking water, cooking water, and laundry water. You see the horrific cycle here. Londoners were drinking water laced with their own waste, getting cholera, dying, and the bacteria-filled waste would go right back into the river. Cholera epidemics killed tens of thousands, but people still blamed bad air instead of the water source. Today we have come a very long way. From squatting in caves, fearing wild beasts, to sharing a filthy sponge stick with Romans, from raining poop on medieval streets, to Japanese smart toilets that automatically open the lid, heat your seat, spray water to clean you, dry you off, and even play music to cover any sensitive noises. We take pushing a button and watching everything disappear for granted, but it is truly the result of thousands of years of suffering disease and extraordinary engineering efforts. Modern sanitation is the thin line separating us from the chaos and disease of the past. It is the silent hero of human civilization. So the next time you sit on your porcelain throne, scrolling through your phone and enjoying the privacy, take a second to silently thank people like Alexander Cummings, Joseph Bazalgette, and Thomas Crapper. Thank them that we don't have to share a sponge with the neighbor. Thank them that we don't have to wear helmets to dodge bombs falling from the second floor, and thank them for the clean water that washes away our troubles. The history of the toilet might be dirty, but the ending is truly clean and fresh. And one final piece of advice from the bottom of my heart: please wash your hands after you go. Seriously, our ancestors suffered enough bacteria. Don't let them down now. Let's face it, I don't care who you are. You could be a powerful CEO, a K-pop stan, or a college student doom-scrolling to avoid a deadline right now. We all share one biological common denominator. We eat, we digest, And eventually, we have to evict the surplus. It is the immutable law of the universe, the great truth that connects all of humanity. But the way human beings have handled this output throughout history, that is not the glorious page of history your teachers taught you in school. It is a roller coaster of creativity, absolute horror, hygiene decisions so bad they're hard to believe, and of course a smell that would peel paint off the walls. Today we aren't talking about kings conquering the world, or inventions that changed humanity, like the light bulb or the steam engine. We are going to talk about the thing history textbooks usually ignore because they're afraid of angry emails from the PTA. We are going to talk about the history of the toilet. Rewind the clock to the Stone Age. Things were honestly pretty simple in a brutally natural sort of way. When a prehistoric human felt the call of nature, they just had to find a tree, a bush, or a rock that provided decent cover. The basic hygiene protocol was squat, take care of business, and pray that a saber-toothed tiger didn't decide you looked like a defenseless snack while you were in your most vulnerable position. What was toilet paper back then? Whatever was within arm's reach leaves moss-flat rocks, or if you live near the ocean and liked living dangerously, seashells. Yes, seashells. Just imagine the abrasion risk on that one. But when humans started getting tired of the nomadic lifestyle and decided to cluster together into civilizations, problems started to brew. When you cram thousands of people into one spot, the volume of waste increases exponentially, and you can't just go wherever you want anymore, unless you want to live in a giant biological minefield. When the Roman Empire fell, darkness covered Europe, and with it came the collapse of hygiene. Welcome to the Middle Ages, or as I like to call it, the Golden Age of filth. Roman plumbing was destroyed or forgotten, and the habit of bathing was considered a luxury, or even sinful. In the majestic castles that movies love to romanticize, the reality was much smellier. Kings and lords used something called a garderobe. It was essentially a stone bench with a hole in it, built jutting out from the castle wall high above the ground. The waste would free fall 20 meters down into the moat below, or simply pile up in a massive mound at the base of the wall. In the winter, freezing wind would blow straight up that hole, freezing everything you hold dear. In the summer, the stench would rise up, attracting flies and creating an indescribable atmosphere. Not to mention designing a hole that leads straight outside sometimes created a deadly security flaw. The peak of this horror was the summer of 1858, a historical event with a very catchy name, the Great Stink. A record-breaking heat wave cooked the Thames, which was thick with human excrement and industrial waste. The smell was so atrocious it paralyzed the capital of the British Empire. At the Parliament building right on the riverbank, powerful politicians had to soak their curtains in chloride of lime walk, around with handkerchiefs pressed to their noses, and many vomited right in the middle of sessions. Only when the stench directly attacked the ruling class did they decide to act. A law was passed in record time, empowering the genius engineer Joseph Bazalgette to build a massive underground sewer system for London. He designed hundreds of kilometers of brick tunnels, using gravity to move sewage far away from the city and the drinking water. This is considered one of the greatest engineering feats in history, saving more lives than any doctor of that era. And finally, we cannot forget the name, Thomas Crapper. There is a popular urban legend that he invented the toilet because his name sounds like crap. In reality, it's the opposite. The word crap existed before, but Thomas Crapper popularized it. He didn't invent the toilet, but he was the Steve Jobs of toilets. He improved the ballcock mechanism in the tank, which we still use today, to stop the water when it's full, and most importantly, he was a marketing genius. Before Crapper, going to the bathroom was taboo and shameful. Crapper opened lavish showrooms in London, displaying shiny white porcelain bowls like works of art, turning the ownership of a flush toilet into a symbol of luxury and civilization. When American soldiers went to Europe in World War I, they saw the name Crapper stamped on all the bowls and started using the phrase, "going to the crapper." And just like that, his name entered linguistic history,